Why did the US position 3 destroyers in the most treacherous shipping lane on the planet? The answer is straightforward. It was a calculated deception, and it all traces back to Iran's Mosquito boats. These compact, agile vessels are notoriously difficult to detect and monitor, making it nearly impossible to trace any assault back to its origin. But that's not where the problems end. According to the CIA, Iran holds enormous caches of anti-ship missiles buried deep beneath the surface, and they represent a severe threat. So how did the US eventually locate these vessels and concealed bases? They laid a trap. They essentially allowed the boats to strike their ships just long enough to trace where they came from. The instant the assault occurred, the US had already identified the exact origin point. What followed was a massive synchronized offensive. Air tankers scrambling from Allied airfields, fighter jets lifting off US carriers, and destroyers unleashing volleys of cruise missiles, all operating in unison to obliterate the source of the assault. How did the US deploy deception in the Strait of Hormuz? The US faced a serious challenge. Clusters of Mosquito boats were relentlessly harassing their forces. They would emerge from nowhere, launch rockets at Navy vessels, and then vanish. So they devised a new approach. They were going to invite an assault on their own destroyers. This is phase 1 of the deception. Under the name Project Freedom, the Navy dispatched 3 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, the Truxtun, the Peralta, and the Mason, directly into enemy territory. This was no routine patrol. It was a deliberate provocation. Though they appeared to be vulnerable targets, these ships were actually supported by a vast invisible defense network, consisting of over a dozen early warning radar aircraft circling high overhead, continuously scanning for the next incoming assault. The mission itself was straightforward. Wait for Iran to take the bait and then completely neutralize their capacity to retaliate. This is phase 2. The moment the Iranians launched their strike, US spy satellites traced the trajectories back to their precise launch points. The military now knew exactly where the attacks had originated. Keshem Island, the nearest launch site for drones and boats. Bandar Abbas, the command center for the entire IRGC Navy. Bandar Kamir and Sirik, coastal positions used to fire the very missiles that had just been intercepted. The moment they identified the origins, they triggered phase 3. Here's how it unfolded. Multiple aerial refueling tankers departed from Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE. FA-18 Super Hornets flying from the USS Abraham Lincoln served as the primary carrier-based strike platforms operating in the Strait of Hormuz region throughout this entire operational window. And these same aircraft would have participated in the strikes on Bandar Abbas and Keshem on May 7th. Carrier strike group assets assigned to CENTCOM included the USS Abraham Lincoln, along with its carrier air wing supporting F-35C Lightning II and FA-18E Super Hornet fighters, cruise missiles, and additional aircraft. But were the destroyers simply sitting idle as bait, as was reported? Well, the most remarkable aspect of the bait and respond doctrine was that the destroyers were executing 2 roles simultaneously. While their radar systems were locked onto incoming Iranian missiles, their decks were already firing Tomahawk cruise missiles in return. The first target was Keshem Island. It sits right within the Strait of Hormuz and is one of the most strategically vital Iranian positions in the entire waterway. During the exchange of strikes between Iranian armed forces and the US, portions of the commercial district of Bandar Keshem were hit. This is target 2, Bandar Abbas, Iran's primary naval hub. Bandar Abbas is the core of Iranian naval operations throughout the Strait of Hormuz and had already been struck multiple times during Operation Epic Fury in February. This is target number 3, Bandar Kamir and Sirik. These are coastal settlements in Hormozgan province along Iran's southern shoreline, directly overlooking the Strait of Hormuz. They function as IRGC naval staging and launch facilities for fast attack vessels and drone missile operations aimed at the waterway. The US Navy then deployed these jets to hit Iranian port facilities. Here is Target 4, Bandar-e-Jask naval checkpoint situated at Mina, roughly 50 miles east of Bandar Abbas. This installation is used by the IRGC to observe and intercept vessel movements. This is the Strait of Hormuz. It's a colossal global chokepoint responsible for approximately 20% of the world's daily oil flow. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, threatening that not a single drop will reach their adversaries. But how do you actually execute that, particularly when your navy has already lost more than 50 of its most valued warships? The answer is uncomplicated. You revert to basics. You resurrect World War II-era tactics. Enter the Mosquito Fleet. Rather than depending on large, easily targeted destroyers, the IRGC Navy deploys swarms of rapid inshore attack craft. We're talking about exceptionally swift, lightweight fiberglass vessels, classes like the Ashura, the Torque, and heavily customized Boaghammer speedboats. But how do these speedboats engage US warships? The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy operates hundreds of compact, fast attack vessels armed with heavy machine guns, rockets, and anti-ship missiles. The tactic is basic, but lethal. Rather than attempting to fight a US destroyer head-on, which would be a losing battle, they launch dozens of small vessels simultaneously from all directions. The objective is to overwhelm the US ship's defensive systems by presenting more targets than the ship can identify and eliminate at once. And they don't limit themselves to military hardware. They actively employ dual-use vessels. To an untrained observer, these resemble ordinary fishing dhows or commercial trawlers, but beneath the surface, they're covertly equipped for clandestine military operations. So, exactly how do these tiny vessels lay heavy naval mines? Since they aren't dedicated large-scale mine layers, you won't find any sophisticated automated systems here. Their techniques are remarkably primitive, but in a narrow bottleneck like the Strait of Hormuz, they are devastatingly effective. It typically comes down to the stern drop method. The mines are simply secured to the rear deck of a small boat. Once they receive their target coordinates, the crew literally rolls or pushes these enormous explosive devices straight off the stern into the water. Some of the slightly larger boats may have basic metal rails to assist in sliding them off, but beyond that, there's nothing more to it. This bare-bones setup is perfectly suited for hit-and-run tactics. The entire strategy relies on velocity and concealment. A small speedboat can dart straight into busy shipping lanes, operate under the cover of darkness, or simply blend in among regular civilian vessels. They drop 2 or 3 mines in mere seconds and then race back to the protection of the Iranian coastline, long before heavier US warships can even get a fix on them. And as for the weapons themselves, these small boats are drawing from an estimated Iranian stockpile of anywhere between 2,000 and 6,000 devices. They deploy everything from basic contact mines, which drift near the surface and explode on impact, to sophisticated bottom mines. These sink to the shallow seabed and simply wait, silently listening, ready to detonate the instant they pick up the acoustic signature of a passing supertanker. How the US is using preemptive destruction capability to strike 16 mine-laying ships. This is strategy 1. Rather than waiting for the mines to enter the water, which would trigger hazardous mine-clearing operations directly under enemy fire, the US acted first. They struck the vessels before they could deploy a single mine. It's a textbook preemptive denial approach. Eliminate the enemy's means of attack before they ever get the opportunity to use it. Here comes strategy number 2, intelligence-driven precision targeting. This strike wasn't speculative. It was the direct outcome of highly actionable intelligence regarding Iran's operational intentions. The US combined signals intelligence from RC-135s, maritime surveillance from P-8s, and human intelligence sources. This enabled them to pinpoint exactly which vessels were the mine layers, where they were anchored, and precisely when they were most exposed. That brings us to strategy number 3, striking vessels while moored. The majority of these targets were actually docked at the time of the strike. Hitting a stationary vessel is immeasurably easier, safer, and more accurate than hunting down a moving target across open water. It also completely removes the risk of a missed strike causing an unintended international incident in a heavily trafficked strait. Strategy number 4 is the dual target doctrine. By simultaneously striking both the mine-laying vessels and the mine storage facilities, the operation ensured that even if replacement boats were on hand, there would be no munitions remaining to load onto them. It's a layered approach designed to maximize the strategic effect of a single coordinated mission. The US didn't rely on a single weapon. They threw everything available at the Mosquito Fleet. They fired Hellfire missiles from drones against small vessels and launched long-range cruise missiles from Navy destroyers positioned just offshore. And to complete the job, heavy strategic bombers dropped massive 2,000-pound GPS-guided bunker busters to completely erase the boats while they were still sheltered inside their storage facilities. This is US Central Command combat footage showing a Hellfire missile engaging enemy mine-laying vessels. Freezing on this frame confirms it as a Hellfire, a munition routinely deployed from the MQ-9 Reaper drone. This vessel is one of 16 destroyed by this type of weapon. It highlights a crucial point. Understanding how these compact missiles function is essential to grasping how they shift the tide of a conflict and neutralize a small navy using a small drone. Let's look inside and examine exactly how these missiles are fired. The operator uses a thumbstick to zoom in on a heat signature, acquiring the target. When ready, there's a trigger button positioned just beneath the joystick. A single squeeze launches the weapon, directing it straight toward its designated target. But how does this compact missile successfully track and destroy a speedboat? Let's examine Hellfire missile tracking and guidance. The AGM-114 Hellfire missile is a precision munition guided via either semi-active laser or millimeter wave radar. This allows it to accurately lock onto and pursue targets, even those moving rapidly across water like a speedboat. The MQ-9 Reaper drone employs advanced onboard sensors and targeting pods to continuously monitor the vessel, transmitting live data to the missile after it's been released. The drone's sophisticated systems can assess the boat's velocity, heading, and maneuvers, enabling the missile's guidance system to anticipate where the boat will be and adjust its trajectory to intercept it. Combined with the MQ-9 Reaper's continuous live tracking, the missile can accurately pursue, forecast, and eliminate a fast-moving vessel traveling at speeds reaching up to 69 miles per hour. When tallied together, the US has eliminated over 60 warships and submarines within a window of just 10 days. First is the Joshan. When this Iranian fast attack craft moved toward a US surface action group, it launched a US-manufactured Harpoon missile, a remnant from pre-revolution arms deals. The USS Wainwright successfully evaded it through electronic countermeasures and chaff deployment. The US vessels immediately returned fire, sinking the Joshan in what became the world's first ever missile engagement between opposing warships. Then came the Sahand. This Iranian frigate sailed out to confront the US fleet and opened fire on passing aircraft. The response was swift. Navy attack jets and the destroyer USS Joseph Strauss converged on the vessel, battering the Sahand with missiles and heavy bombs until it ignited and eventually sank after its own ammunition detonated. Later that same afternoon, a third vessel, the Sabalon, tried its fortune. The frigate launched a surface-to-air missile at a US aircraft. The pilot simply evaded the missile, circled back around, and released a 500-pound laser-guided bomb directly down the ship's exhaust stack. The internal detonation completely disabled the vessel. The overarching objective behind all of this was to secure the Strait of Hormuz, the single most critical choke point for global oil supply.